As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission, I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain, keep on working, open curtains. Haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. I'm never gonna give up, fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHH LP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.
Harry, good morning, and everyone else out there, good morning on this planet and other planets. It's really kind of a pleasure to kind of be back in the saddle. I've been out for the past few weeks, just kind of doing some things and living the life and fulfilling obligations. But this particular show, we're really blessed to kind of talk about the Society for Consciousness Studies. And believe it or not, you may not have heard about the Society for Consciousness Studies before, but you're going to hear about them today for the next 45 minutes. And in fact, you can not only hear, but you could also kind of check out some of the programs and some of their conferences and some of their website and their presenters and topics. And just the Society for Consciousness Studies, there's going to be a conference here on May 31st or June 2nd at the Divinity School. And there is a limitation as the date approaches in terms of the number of remaining seats. But you could give it a shot and see if membership is still open. But I really wanted to have this show to talk about the conference. But this is more importantly, just what the Society for Consciousness Studies is all about. We hear so much in our society about strife and conflict and lack of peace and warfare and just issues that divide us and cause turmoil and stress, et cetera, et cetera. So the Society for Consciousness Studies is really an organization that I've really been intrigued to kind of initially kind of become aware of. And I have Leslie Combs is on the line, president and founder of the society. Stephen Mitchell is here in the studio, as well as he brought along James Clement Van Pelt. I like this kind of say these whole names of people. And Stephen came down from the Buffalo area. So by the way, Leslie, are you on the line?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear. So welcome. Let's talk about. We have something cooking on May 31st and June 2nd here in New Haven, and you I understand you're kind of one of the pot stirrers in terms of why that's taking place.
Well, the society meets in San Francisco on odd years and on the East Coast on the other years, and this is a Yale year. We've met at Yale 3 or 4 times in the past on every other year, and this has turned out to be quite a successful conference, and it's kind of gone viral among many people who are interested in consciousness. So it looks like it'll be quite a wonderful conference, and well, we have some people coming that are very well known.
Sure.
Deepak Chopra, for example, will be there in
Deepak
person.
Is coming in person,
pretty much the whole
not
conference.
online, but in person, with his red shoes.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
He's coming in with his red shoes.
I don't know. Maybe he'll have his glasses with diamonds or whatever he's got in those things. I don't know. He's gotten more interested lately in working with students and schools that teach consciousness studies that he can be involved with. So we actually originally had someone lined up for this morning from the California Institute of Human Sciences in San Diego, which has a program in consciousness studies, both master's and PhD. And he's now affiliated with them officially. And just locally here in New Haven, I should say there in New Haven, the Graduate Institute of Connecticut has long had a master's program in consciousness studies. And Deepak, I can't say he's on the faculty now, but he's definitely interested in that program and those folks. And he's in connection with the Graduate Institute of Connecticut, which is right down the road, about 20 minutes away.
Yes, I believe we have some Bethany.
So he's interested in networking with younger people now and spreading, educational seeds.
That's tremendous. Steve and James, for folks that want to get more information, because for radio, folks kind of come in and out. They're getting out of their car. Sometimes they're at work and they can't pay absolute attention. How do folks find out more information about the Society for Consciousness Studies, the upcoming conference, and just the activities and even the membership criteria?
You could check out our webpage at .org. So it's C as in Charlie, O as in Oscar, N as in Nancy, S as in Sierra, C as in Charlie.org. And there you'll find information for the upcoming conference. You'll find the presenters, abstracts. There's also a link to our organization's webpage, which is Society for Consciousness Studies.org.
Indeed. Let
me just say, too, that if you just Google Yale Consciousness Conference, you'll pull it up pretty quickly.
Excellent. And even if we just Google your name, Leslie, I'm told we'll get a lot of stuff.
Well, you'll get about 400, but then you have to figure out which one you want.
Well, you've been around in this area for so long, kind of tilling the field is so important. James, what's the and the Divinity School has kind of you're involved with the department at the Divinity School that's kind of connected to this thesis and this movement and this passion.
I was the head of the initiative in religion, science, and technology for many years, and that was the Divinity School's confrontation with science. How does science work with religion and spirituality?
And so it's no longer in existence?
Not in the form it was, where we had courses and things.
Okay.
But now we do conferences instead. And
Excellent.
This is one of those conferences.
Tremendous. Believe it or not, gentlemen, I had a chance to graduate from the Divinity School in '75, but the criteria was a little lower then, and it wasn't as rigorous. But I still can probably
No, let's not have that.
All right. I'm gonna
try to redeem. You did good work.
Yeah, I paid them well, like all the scandals recently in the world. But
I can hardly wait to go see your.
I might have a comment about this too, about the Divinity School,
Please.
Because I think it's right on target.
All
you
right.
know, everybody sort of seems to know these days that the American culture is clearly moving in the direction of less religion but more spirituality. You know this.
Yes,
Surveys show people say, "Oh, I don't belong to a church. I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual." Well, what's that supposed to mean? Well, one of the things that's supposed to mean is that I have some sense of who I am in a kind of spiritual way, and there's no more direct path to that than talking about consciousness. So exploring consciousness is another way of exploring who I am. You know, in fact, a lot of the mystical traditions in the East just have this as a mantra. Who am I? Who am I?
Yes.
Not this, not that, and so on. So consciousness, aside from as a field, which we can talk about later, permeating everything from neuroscience to archaeology nowadays, I think people find in trying to understand themselves deeply that consciousness is the direction to go in, whether they're using meditation, whether they're using philosophy, whether they're just reading, thinking. But who am I in a spiritual sense? So the School of Divinity is a perfect place to support this sort of effort.
Well, you know what? Now I'm going to use that, Leslie. I think that I'm going to use it as the excuse for people when I tell people why I win. I appreciate your saying that. It didn't dawn on me 30 years ago, but now it's all clear. You know, I can see the.
Oh yeah, consciousness is no longer a sideline curiosity. It's about who I am, who you are, how we're connected, and what life is really about underneath all the different religions and beliefs and everything else. We've got this all in common, and we have it all in common with other living species on the planet too. We're beginning to discover everything from orcas to chimpanzees share a lot with us in terms of what they experience, the compassion, caring, social behavior, and so on. So I won't run on about that, but
no, that's great. That's great. And tease us in that same tune, Steve and James as well. Deepak is certainly, if you will, the headliner. But when I was looking at the presenters, that list is very impressive of the other folks that are kind of tease us a little bit, share a little bit about some of the other topics and presenters.
Okay. Well, of course, Ken Wilber is very well known. Now he's going to just Skype in. In fact, he may just send us a video. I'm not sure. But he's an old friend of mine. And he was a very major item about 10 years ago. He's written probably more books on spirituality and consciousness than anybody else alive. at least in the English language, and has quite a large following. And he is going to have some things to say about consciousness and spirituality. Also, there's a film going to come out in the next year called Grace and Grit. This is based on the title of his book about his experience with his wife who died of cancer shortly after they got married years and years ago. But it's a tearjerker. Wonderfully written book, and it's being made into a real movie now, Grace and Grit. I'm trying to get some clips from it for the conference, so we'll see.
And Ken Wilber
would like to share them if
Ken Wilber, Wilber. It's
What's
just
that?
It's for people that are unfamiliar with his last name. His last name is spelled.
It's Wilber. Wilber. Ken Wilber. It's very plain American English. A lot of people that are more sophisticated and know what to do with keep writing Wilbur. It's not that. It's just plain Wilber. You know?
Tremendous. And who else?
He still has a huge following, but a few years ago, I mean, this is a guy who got $1 million on a book title. It hasn't written yet. A decade or so back, he sold so many books, and I think the Clintons were carrying around a copy of one of his books.
See? Excellent.
when they were president. So we're going to hear from him, even if we don't have a lot of interaction. He's going to send us a video.
Yes.
I'm hoping to get a little bit of his movie. Let's see, who else have we got? Irvin Laszlo.
One thing I wanted
video in from live from Europe last year. He's an old friend of mine. He's either coming from Budapest, where he hangs out a lot, or his home in Italy, near Siena. Irvin is, I don't know quite how to put it. He's not that well known in the U.S., but this is a guy who he has more awards and books, over 200, and is connected with more people. I mean, he used to be director of research for the United Nations peace effort, and good friend of Gorbachev. So I gave him a paper I wrote once. He said, "Oh, it's a good paper. I give it to Gorbachev this afternoon at the World Conference." So Irvin is quite old now. He's in his 80s, middle 80s at least, but he's relentless. And he keeps writing, and he continues to travel. He's going to be out here in California at the Institute of Noetic Sciences conference in a little over a month, and I'm hoping to see him because that's near where I live.
So in some ways, this is an international conference.
And he's shown up in person at one or two. A couple of years ago at Yale, he was. I just wrote him an email just on a lark. I said, "Hey, Irvin, you're going to be on the East Coast at this date?" He said, "Oh, yeah, that's great. I'm going to be addressing the United Nations. Just have somebody drive down to New York and pick me up." So.
Tremendous. You're listening to the.
So he's going to be there.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin
and
show.
And Nancy Abrams, I'm not as familiar with, but she's done wonderful work on cosmology. She doesn't consider herself a kind of religious person at all. But she has a cosmic view. I think it's really wonderful, and I'm hoping we can share discussion with her and that she'll spend some time with us. I've been trying to talk her into having a dialogue with me about science fiction movies, like Extraterrestrial. But she's not answering my mail, so I don't know whether she's a science fiction
We'll track her down in May, right? We'll track her down here in the East Coast.
Leslie, let's be sure to mention that we have a public event as part of our conference. On the evening of the 31st, Friday. The doors are open to anybody to participate, and we will have Deepak Chopra live and Nancy Abrams live, and answering questions and speaking about consciousness. And Nancy has a very interesting perspective on all this because she's an atheist. But according to her book, A God That Could Be Real, what happened to her was she signed up for a 12-step program, and it didn't work because that requires a higher power. So she developed a way that an atheist can have a higher power.
Yes.
And so that's one thing that she might be talking about.
Boy, that's very inclusive. You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show, and again, we're talking about the Society for Consciousness Studies, which really has an international flavor as well, and they're going to have a conference at the Divinity School May 31st to June 2nd. And Jim, just repeat again about the public session.
The public session is at the Divinity School, starts at 7 o'clock, featuring Nancy Abrams and Deepak Chopra. and we have capacity for about 200 people. So please show up early.
Indeed.
And it's going to be great because it is the doors are wide open.
Yes.
And they are ready to answer questions and interact with the audience.
Share some of the topics. When I was looking at the program, because again, everyone will not have a chance to kind of be there end of this month and early next month. But when I looked at the program at the Society for Consciousness Studies, and I would just urge anyone that's listening, just kind of go to that site and look at. So share some of the topics, and just the topics are really, and the categories of presenters is really just, I think, profound as we kind of decide what life is all about as we move forward.
To me, the crucial topic is summed up in the title of the conference.
Okay.
Consciousness and spirit. So what do we mean by spirit? Spirit, is it real? Is it a metaphor? Do we mean like school spirit? Because what we're up against is whether reality is all physical, like some scientists would take that position perhaps, or whether there's room for things that are not spirit, not material, such as spirit. So to me, that's a very vital topic.
Absolutely. Steve?
So again, the website is conch.org, CONSC.org. And if we look through the abstract section of the page, one of our presenters is a woman named Natalie Geld, and she was on Nash Bridges with Don Johnson. She played a doctor on the show, and then she went and became a doctor. She works with Bernie Bars, who's he's got a PhD in neurobiology, but their work is related to consciousness because they look at the brain in terms of consciousness. Some of these other folks, there's a guy named Simon Senzen, and he's a chiropractor by trade, but he's also interested in consciousness.
Yes.
So even though these people come from various fields, we're all connected.
That's what really kind of impressed me. Leslie and James and Steve, we touched upon the importance, but again, as a public show that is going worldwide and people are listening in, and you've already, Jim, you've already mentioned about someone being an atheist. Why is this important? Let's kind of drill down a little bit more again and repeat, even if you want to, why the society is important, why the conference is important, why this study and academic study and personal study is important.
Well, I think Leslie did address that initially, but I think what we could add to that is the idea of what consciousness represents, because we've made huge progress in understanding our neural system and our brain, and almost no progress in understanding how consciousness actually turns into our experience. And is our experience physical? It doesn't seem physical. When I imagine a donut, that's ephemeral. And yet there it is. How is that possible? How does that work? So it's an area of huge potential in terms of study and what we can learn about ourselves, and how, and as Leslie was saying, how we relate to the other species, the other animals who share so much of our experience.
Steve?
Yeah, I can comment on that Leslie, too, please. But I don't want to cut you off, James.
No, he's waiting for you, Leslie. Chip in, please.
Okay, well, I just want to say that, a few decades back, consciousness was really not supposed to be discussed by academic, serious scientific people. Ironically, it was a brain scientist who really brought it back. Back in the 60s and 70s, started talking about consciousness. And now it's become really important. People understand that you can't talk about a lot of things without talking about consciousness. So here's sort of a list of some of the areas that people talk about consciousness. Psychological processes, cognitive studies, has permeated psychology. Artificial intelligence, at the last major conference I was at a year or so ago, there was a lot of discussion of artificial intelligence and robots, essentially, and whether they're really conscious or not. In fact, what's the name of this robot that now is an official resident of one of the Middle Eastern countries? They brought her in, and she talks about it. Sophia, I think, is her name. You can find her on the web. She'll talk to people. She's like what's his name in Star Trek? Data. You know, he's really a robot, but he's so human that he's more human than half the crew. And neuropsychology that James just mentioned, study of the brain. There's wonderful things coming out in that field now. For example, we have a kind of device, a process that will, sort of a variation on the MRI, that will let us essentially know if a person is conscious or not. Now, this may seem trivial, but it's not when you're looking at people that have been in comas for years.
Well, good point.
There have been some very famous court cases over this. Should you unplug them or not? Are they conscious or not? The Karen Kremlin case was really a big deal in the 70s. Now, with this thing, you can tell. And in fact, you can have the person imagine something like a ping pong ball or throwing a ball back and forth, and you can watch the activity go on in the brain. There's a wonderful movie a few years back called what was it called? The Butterfly in the Bell Jar, or The Butterfly in the Diving Bell, something like that.
Diving Bell.
And it's a true story. It's actually written by a person who had what's called the locked-in syndrome. And that means you can't tell whether they're conscious or not, or awake or not. And he was actually able to do enough by moving his eyes to write this book before he died. I think it was pneumonia, which is what happens to a lot of them. So brain science, consciousness is very, very important, because what parts of the brain are conscious? We're going to have Bernie Bars at the conference, or at least he's going to pipe in. Bernie Bars is the leading person in the world on understanding the relationship of consciousness to the brain, what goes on in the brain. And he has a brand new book coming out, and he's even doing a seminar on it. If you get logged in there in time, you can be in his seminar on this book. It's a wonderful book. He's a wonderful writer. He's almost as clear as reading William James or one of the classics. And then there's the whole field of physics and quantum physics, and there are lots of people talking about that, the whole area. But you can find a whole counter at the local bookstore on quantum physics and consciousness, and it ranges from Nobel laureates down to people with just lots of opinions. But it's a very exciting area, and it's totally alive. Anyway, I could talk more about it. And one of the things we're seeing a lot of now, just recently, is interest in animal consciousness and intelligence. It turns out that dolphins, and especially orcas, killer whales, they're just really smart. They got a big brain. Orcas have a big brain. They have social behavior that's incredibly complex. And we're also elephants, they have social behavior that's amazing. They also can paint. There's been a lot of discussion. The African gray parrot, you may know that one, learned 2,000 or 3,000 words, and we'll talk to you about it. Tell you it wants some chocolate, then what kind of a car, ask you what kind of a car you came in, and so on. So it turns. Even octopi turns out they're pretty darn smart. They got a big brain, some of them, and they have social interactions that are complex.
Yale has
a whole field of parapsychology.
Parapsychology.
I don't want to go on and on, but I could. Out of the body experiences.
People have to come out to see you, James.
What's going on with the unconscious, and there's a lot of interest nowadays in what I would call anthropological, cross-cultural, looking at it's very fashionable on the West Coast to go down to Brazil or somewhere and find yourself a shaman and have an ayahuasca experience. Well, psychedelic drugs have been around since the 60s. We just lost one of the great researchers, Ralph Metzner, who's written books. He's got a book called, I recommend it very highly, it's called The Ecology of Consciousness.
Ecology of
the whole
Consciousness.
history of all of this. He just passed away a few weeks
did
ago.
He?
But there's a lot of interest right now, and the school I teach at, California Institute of Integral Studies, has a whole, not graduate program, but workshop kind of training in psychedelic therapy and treatment and so on.
Leslie, let me just interrupt for a second.
And
then
there's a whole issue of developmental studies and how people grow, how they change, how they go from being I was just watching the other night for the third time. I think I've seen all versions of it. Les Miserables. There's a version of it coming out week by week now on PBS, I guess. And then there's an older movie with Liam Neeson, and then there's a fairly recent musical, which I don't recommend, but it's a musical. But that's a story about a man who starts out as the lowest grade of human being. He gets in trouble by stealing from children, and then he ends up growing to quite a generous, wonderful person near the end. It's a wonderful, of course, great classic, but this is a whole field of study. I've written several books on it myself, how people grow through stages of personal growth, and personal growth becomes spiritual growth as you go along.
Leslie, hold on to that. Leslie?
And that's all aside from the philosophy, the philosophers talking about what consciousness is. And, we can trace that all the way back to Plato and stuff. So there's a great history there.
Tremendous. You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on the Society for Consciousness Studies. We're chatting and we have Leslie Combs on the line, and he's the founder, and Steve Mitchell with us, and James Van Pelt. Gentlemen, weigh in on the fact of, again, I want to come back to why, and do you really feel deep down in your heart and soul and spirit that this will make a difference for the world to kind of become a better place? In very kind of basic terms, is this activity that you guys have devoted your life into your memberships, you're creating the organization? Why is this important? And do you think in your heart of hearts that it can contribute to us making this a better?
I'd like to hear James comment on that. If I get going, I'll be take up the whole rest of the
hour.
Right.
So he'll save you a few minutes. We'll save you a few minutes.
James, would you like to say something about this?
Thanks. I would, because you brought up the idea of animal consciousness. And in fact, Yale has a center for canine consciousness. But
I didn't know that.
Isn't that amazing? But
what kind of dogs you got?
They're very
Who let
vocal.
the dogs out? That's the thing.
My corgis are conscious.
Sure they are. But the reason why the reason why we're in the pickle that we're in a planetary sense is because we have positioned ourselves as the dominant species, the top of the food chain. But that's a recipe for disaster. We need to reconnect with the other species and redefine our species as the intelligence of all life. And the way to do that is to consider how our consciousnesses work together and all that we have in common. Until we realize that another animal is not a little robot.
Or something to be eaten.
Exactly, food. Until we realize that our job is to care for the other animals and share their spirits, we don't have enough to bind our civilization together, given the stresses that we're undergoing.
Well, I'm going to agree completely with James, and I'm going to answer your question from a completely different angle, and that is in terms of what's going on in society and culture and among people, especially young people. In the world today, we have an epidemic of depression, ennui, boredom, and suicides.
And murder.
It's unbelievable. And it's frightening. And then, of course, we have all the violence going where people just go out and shoot other people, especially among young people again. So the connection here is that religion that used to service all this and provide people with meaningful lives it's still doing, I'm sure, for a lot of people, but it's not going the distance. So we've got lots of people in serious, serious trouble. I mean, I just read a study a while ago about how young people are all living on the internet, and especially on their cell phones, and the longer you spend there, the more depressed they get. And the more isolated. I mean, we got people like in Japan, they're famous young people. They sort of live in a little box and they never come out. And they just play video games all day, and all night. And we got a lot of those people here too. So there's no simple solution to this, but one direction is as people begin to grow and expand and understand who they are and their subtle as well as social connections with people around them, their lives become more meaningful. So there's this problem of isolation, of depression, and understanding consciousness, not in an intellectual way, but in a kind of, I would say, spiritual, essential, human, heartfelt way, I think is the major hope we have for moving to a better world, a world of people that are more compassionate, who feel more connected, and so on. So our conference is very on the academic side of these issues, but I think the future, the hopeful future, is in the expansion of consciousness in larger and more spiritual dimensions. And you know, even what's her name, Nancy Abrams, who claims to be an atheist, is going that way and kind of on a different track. But you know, I think she wants to change the title of her talk to "We're All Cosmic Citizens." This is reminiscent of, you know, and I'm trying to get her to talk about movies like The Space Odyssey and stuff. We're all connected on a big canvas, and our hope is to connect hands across that canvas, across the world, and across the cosmos.
And Leslie, you indicated earlier, in terms of the expansion of the academic institutions for degree granting and the graduate place here in Bethany. When did you started? The society was incorporated 4 years ago.
2012.
2012. Well, do you remember what the impetus was for you at that point? Did you wake up one morning and say, you know what we need? Do you remember what was kind of the?
Well, I'm a faculty member of the California Institute of Integral Studies, which has a long history related to consciousness and especially Eastern spirituality. And I have a lot of friends who are interested in consciousness, so it really started out as sort of a listserv, just people emailing back and forth about consciousness, and we sort of built that into a very small society, 10 or 20 people. As somebody said, well, Alan, it looks just like your friends, and that's what it was. It's now grown to pushing on 100 people, and I get requests almost every day from people who want to join, be part of the society. So that's an example of how the whole field has grown and how interest in the field has grown. We're now seeing lots of young people who want to know how they can incorporate awareness of consciousness in their graduate studies. And I get lots of emails, especially from India and the Middle East and different places around the world where people want to know how they can fit in, what schools they can go to, and where they could even work in this area.
And Steve, speaking about, as Alan referenced, the academic, and you're working on your doctorate in this field, so share a little bit about your doctoral studies and the research that you're undertaking.
Well, I am working on an app that could be used as a way for people to be self-reflective in understanding that they may have a prevalence towards tech addiction. So if anybody knows how to make an app, my cell phone number. No, I'm just kidding. So something Leslie didn't mention that I would like to say about the Society for Consciousness Studies. From what I understand, part of the reason he started it, and part of the reason he started the journals that the organization has is to give students a forum to be able to present their research alongside professionals like Terry Marks Tarlow and Deepak Chopra and all this. So Chopra is going to hang out and students, or doctorate students, master students even, are going to get up and present papers that they've written while he sits in the audience and you know, is able to be helping them. You know? So that's awesome.
Please, James.
I wanted to mention about science fiction that we are having a 2-hour session on Star Trek.
Okay.
And the reason for that is not because we love Star Trek, but because there's
yeah,
some of us do. Some of us do.
Well, then please come to that session. But it's a unique show in the sense that it's gone over such a long period in 3 or 4 different incarnations.
Yes.
And the difference between the Kirk version, the original, and let's say the current version, which is called Discovery, there's a tremendous difference. And yet, how do you put your finger on that? It's a difference in consciousness. And it shows up in how women are treated, in how aliens are regarded, in how the mission of the group is all these things show a transition over that 40-year period. So we're going to look at that and show how subtly consciousness can change the outward appearance and the inner meaning of things.
Tremendous. Again, you're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show, and as we conclude, please go to the Society for Consciousness Studies, find out about them. There's an upcoming conference here at the Divinity School. Gentlemen, we have about 10 minutes or so. Talk to me about practical, for a person that wants to kind of improve their toolbox, their kit. How can they get started? Should they meditate? Should they read? Drop some names or some books on us.
They should meditate. Although we can argue over that. Ken Wilber, of course, promotes meditation, but I think back in the days of humanistic psychology, the device, the method was growth groups and encounter groups, and that was back in the 70s and 60s. But I think the main method for developing consciousness nowadays for most people is some form of meditation.
I would also suggest attending consciousness conferences. I remember the first.
There you go. Yes.
well, not just ours, but there's an incredible one in Tucson, Arizona. There is the non-duality. There's a number of them that explore consciousness from different aspects, and you just get immersed in it for a few days. And
yes, the non-duality conferences are big conferences. They're held every year. They're out near me here. I don't have the URL for them, but they bring in all these people. Deepak's almost always there, and it's quite a major event. So it's good to mention that.
And
James.
of course,
let me also mention that the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which you can find quickly on the web, Institute of Noetic Sciences, has a conference coming up in July, I believe, or June. This is going to be a major conference. Erwin Laszlo will be there in person. Yours truly will be there
All right.
in person. I don't know whether Deepak will be there or not, but the Institute of Noetic Sciences has been a leader in consciousness research and human development way back. It was founded by, which astronaut was it? James, do you remember? He's the one that founded the Institute decades ago, and he's passed away now. I knew him well personally, but that's another one. IONS, IONS, Institute of Noetic Sciences, that Brown made into kind of a weird organization in one of his novels, but it's a very serious society for human development and consciousness. So they have this big conference coming up.
And Leslie, you mentioned
the non-dual science conference. That's a big one.
If you go online,
experiential activity in that one. Ours is a little more academic, and every year there's a big conference on consciousness. It's either in Tucson or this year it's in Switzerland. Goes back and forth from the U.S. To across the sea, and we're benefiting this year from the fact that they're in Switzerland, because a lot of our speakers and our people that are coming would be going to the quote-unquote Tucson conference if it were in Tucson. I always go to it, and I'm almost always a speaker at it. So it'll be back in Tucson next year. Although it's tempting to go to Switzerland.
Another way to get into this is
anyway.
Another way to get into this is simply to go online, go to the TED website, type in consciousness, go to YouTube consciousness, go to YouTube and type in some of these names like Deepak, and there's a college degree course available for free online about consciousness at these websites.
Tremendous. Well, we are really privileged to have you. Look forward to seeing you here, Leslie, in a few weeks, and really privileged to help get the word out. We have about 5 minutes, gentlemen. Just what anything on your heart, mind, and soul you'd like to share? Because this has really been an exciting discussion, and I guess I'm still a little young in my age, so I think I have a few more years to kind of practice and get up to speed.
Well, I just really want to remind people about the public event, because those doors are wide open, and what a great way to get into this field, to go to that free.
Please share. So
that free event, including Deepak, and our big guns will be there and be very accessible.
On what's It's on Friday.
So it's Friday the 31st. It starts at 7 p.m. and it's at the Yale Divinity School, 409 Prospect Street, New Haven.
Excellent. And Leslie, share, I guess, as we kind of conclude again, some books. You mentioned your books and Ken Wilber's books. Who else would you add? And Deepak obviously is.
Well, Deepak has a new book coming out called what is it? Metahuman. It's a wonderful book. I've just read it, and it'll be out in a few weeks.
Okay.
And I think that's it. Ultra Human or Metahuman. I think it's Metahuman. And Bernard Bars, Baars, has a book coming out on the brain and consciousness. It's a book by a neuropsychologist, and it has some technical material, but he's a wonderful writer. And this is really a major book. He's the guy who's written about consciousness.
It's Baars.
So those are a few recommendations, and then lots of our folks have books that they will bring, or I'm asking people to bring little flyers with what we call publisher's discount if you order from these.
Good. Lastly, as we conclude, gentlemen, this question just popped into my mind.
I should say Nancy has several books. They look
that's
wonderful.
Right, Nancy Abrams.
I'm trying to read them.
Yep, Nancy Abrams.
Yes.
The pharmacology, and people are taking external stimulants to help them with their consciousness. Any comment about that, how they don't need to necessarily be prone to those addictions?
Well,
a shaman.
A small amount can be useful to open your eyes to realize that what you consider reality is really so-called reality, and there are greater dimensions. But once you've got that, then it's probably time to ease off, because as your mind reconstructs itself after the experience, it may not quite come back together the way you wanted it to.
So there's
well, James, you make a very good point, and I want to mention that it's very fashionable in my part of the world, and among quite a few serious researchers, to do what's called microdosing. You get little teeny tiny doses of drugs that facilitate consciousness, and you take those, and you don't go on a big trip.
Yeah.
But microdosing, Now, I'm not recommending it, by the way. I don't know anything about this field, and I think people can get themselves in a lot of trouble. It'd be better off to go to some place like CIS and get involved in one of the workshops. But anyway, that's another process that's going on.
Tremendous. Gentlemen, thank you so much again. This has been the Tom Ficklin Show, and we've been trying to share some information about the Society for Consciousness Studies, and not just the Society and the upcoming conference, but just give us a moment to reflect on what does it mean to be the species and to be a representative on this planet, and what is our role, responsibility, and our imagination as we move forward for trying to create kind of peace on Earth. Any kind of closing comments from any of the three of you?
You did a great job, Tom. It's not easy to talk about this topic, and you've really drawn us out.
Thank you. Steve?
I would say
we're all trying to wake up here, and this is great. Great conversation. You're doing a great service for a lot of people. Thank you.
I would just say that Professor Combs, he practice is what he preaches in terms of consciousness. I mean, at this conference, we spent the last 6 months organizing the schedule so that everybody who gave us a paper could speak. So whether it's on plant consciousness or global sustainability or chiropractic and consciousness, Star Trek, yeah, even James gets to speak. So yeah, everybody got to present. So I mean, that is consciousness.
Indeed. Embodied the universality. Absolutely.
So go check out consc.org.
Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Leslie, thanks for calling in. I know it's a little early for you to get up this morning, but we'll see you.
It is. Yeah, I'm a late sleeper, so this has been great. I don't know whether I can go back to bed or not now, but thank you so much. What a thrill.
Thank you so much, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains, haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version.